a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was a South African anti-apartheid revolutionary, political leader, peace activist, and philanthropist who served as President of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the country's first black head of state and the first elected in a fully representative democratic election. His government focused on dismantling the legacy of apartheid by tackling institutionalized racism and fostering racial reconciliation. Ideologically an African nationalist and socialist, he served as president of the African National Congress Party from 1991 to 1997. A Xhosa. Mandela was born to the Thembu royal family in Mvezo, British South Africa. He studied law at the University of Fort Hare and the University of the Witwatersrand before working as a lawyer in Johannesburg. There he became involved in anti-colonial and African nationalist politics, joining the ANC in 1943 and co-founding its Youth League in 1944. After the National Party's white-only government established apartheid, a system of racial segregation that privileged whites, he and the ANC committed themselves to its overthrow. Mandela was appointed president of the ANC's Transvaal branch, rising to prominence for his involvement in the 1952 Defiance Campaign and the 1955 Congress of the People. He was repeatedly arrested for seditious activities and was unsuccessfully prosecuted in the 1956 treason trial. Influenced by Marxism, he secretly joined the banned South African Communist Party. Although initially committed to non-violent protest, in association with the SACP co-founded the militant Umkhonto we Sizwe in 1961 and led a sabotage campaign against the government. He was arrested and imprisoned in 1962 and subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring to overthrow the state following the Rivonia trial. Mandela served 27 years in prison, split between Robben Island, Pollsmoor Prison, and Victor Verster Prison. Amid growing domestic and international pressure, and with fears of a racial civil war, President F.W. de Klerk released him in 1990. Mandela and de Klerk led efforts to negotiate an end to apartheid, which resulted in the 1994 multiracial general election in which Mandela led the ANC to victory and became president. Leading a broad coalition government which promulgated a new constitution, Mandela emphasized reconciliation between the country's racial groups and created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate past human rights abuses. Economically, Mandela's administration retained its predecessor's liberal framework despite his own socialist beliefs, also introducing measures to encourage land reform, combat poverty, and expand healthcare services. Internationally, he acted as mediator in the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing trial and served as Secretary General of the Non-Aligned Movement from 1998 to 1999. He declined a second presidential term and in 1999 was succeeded by his deputy, Thabo Mbeki. Mandela became an elder statesman and focused on combating poverty and HIV/AIDS through the charitable Nelson Mandela Foundation. Mandela was a controversial figure for much of his life. Although critics on the right denounced him as a communist terrorist, and those on the radical left deemed him too eager to negotiate and reconcile with apartheid's supporters, he gained international acclaim for his activism. Widely regarded as an icon of democracy and social justice, he received more than 250 honors, including the Nobel Peace Prize, and became the subject of a cult of personality. He is held in deep respect within South Africa, where he is often referred to by his Xhosa clan name, Madiba, and described as the father of the nation. Childhood, 1918-1934. Mandela was born on the 18th of July 1918 in the village of Mvezo in Umtata, then part of South Africa's Cape Province. Given the forename Rolihlahla, a Xhosa term colloquially meaning troublemaker, in later years he became known by his clan name, Madiba. His patrilineal great-grandfather, Ngubengcuka, was king of the Thembu people in the Transkeian territories of South Africa's modern Eastern Cape Province. One of Ngubengcuka's sons, named Mandela, was Nelson's grandfather and the source of his surname. Because Mandela was the king's child by a wife of the Xhosa clan, a so-called left-hand house, the descendants of his cadet branch of the royal family were morganatic, ineligible to inherit the throne, but recognized as hereditary royal councillors. Nelson Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mfekanizwe Mandela, was a local chief and councillor to the monarch. He was appointed to the position in 1915, after his predecessor was accused of corruption by a governing white magistrate. In 1926, Gadla was also sacked for corruption. But Nelson was told that his father had lost his job for standing up to the magistrate's unreasonable demands. A devotee of the god Kamuta, Gadla was a polygamist with 4 wives, 4 sons and 9 daughters, who lived in different villages. Nelson's mother was Gadla's 3rd wife, Noskani Fanny, daughter of Nkadima of the right-hand house and a member of the Mvezo clan of the Xhosa. Mandela later stated that his early life was dominated by traditional Thembu custom and taboo. He grew up with 2 sisters in his mother's kraal in the village of Kunu, where he tended herds as a cattle boy, and spent much time outside with other boys. Both his parents were illiterate, but being a devout Christian, his mother sent him to a local Methodist school when he was about 7. Baptized a Methodist, Mandela was given the English forename of Nelson by his teacher. When Mandela was about 9, his father came to stay at Kunu, where he died of an undiagnosed ailment which Mandela believed to be lung disease. Feeling cut adrift, he later said that he inherited his father's proud rebelliousness and stubborn sense of fairness. Mandela's mother took him to the Great Place Palace at Mkhekezweni, where he was entrusted to the guardianship of the Thembu regent, Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo. Although he did not see his mother again for many years, Mandela felt that Jongintaba and his wife New England treated him as their own child, raising him alongside their son, Justice, and daughter, Nomafu. As Mandela attended church services every Sunday with his guardians, Christianity became a significant part of his life. He attended a Methodist mission school located next to the palace, where he studied English, Xhosa, history and geography. He developed a love of African history, listening to the tales told by elderly visitors to the palace, and was influenced by the anti-imperialist rhetoric of a visiting chief, Joyi. At the time he nevertheless considered the European colonialists not as oppressors, but as benefactors who had brought education and other benefits to southern Africa. Aged 16, he, Justice, and several other boys traveled to Rolihlahla to undergo the Ulwaluko circumcision ritual that symbolically marked their transition from boys to men. Afterwards he was given the name Dalibunga. Clarkebury, Healdtown, and Fort Hare, 1934-1940. Intending to gain skills needed to become a Privy Councillor for the Thembu Royal House, in 1933 Mandela began his secondary education at Clarkebury Methodist High School in Nkobo, a Western-style institution that was the largest school for black Africans in Thembuland. Made to socialize with other students on an equal basis, he claimed that he lost his stuck-up attitude, becoming best friends with a girl for the first time. He began playing sports and developed his lifelong love of gardening. He completed his junior certificate in 2 years, and in 1937 moved to Healdtown, the Methodist college in Fort Beaufort attended by most Thembu royalty, including Justice. The headmaster emphasized the superiority of English culture and government. But Mandela became increasingly interested in native African culture, making his first non-Xhosa friend, a speaker of Sotho, and coming under the influence of one of his favorite teachers, a Xhosa who broke taboo by marrying a Sotho. Mandela spent much of his spare time at Healdtown as a long-distance runner and boxer, and in his second year he became a prefect. With Jongintaba's backing, in 1939 Mandela began work on a BA degree at the University of Fort Hare, an elite black institution in Alice, Eastern Cape, with around 150 students. There he studied English, anthropology, politics, native administration, and Roman Dutch law in his first year, desiring to become an interpreter or clerk in the Native Affairs Department. Mandela stayed in the Wesley House dormitory, befriending his own kinsman, K. D. Matanzima, as well as Oliver Tambo, who became a close friend and comrade for decades to come. He took up ballroom dancing, performed in a drama society play about Abraham Lincoln, and gave Bible classes in the local community as part of the Student Christian Association. Although he had friends connected to the African National Congress who wanted South Africa to be independent of the British Empire, Mandela avoided any involvement with the anti-imperialist movement and became a vocal supporter of the British war effort when the Second World War broke out. He helped to found a first-year Students' House Committee which challenged the dominance of the second years, and at the end of his first year became involved in a Students' Representative Council boycott against the quality of food, for which he was suspended from the university. He never returned to complete his degree. Arriving in Johannesburg, 1941-1943. Returning to Mkhekezweni in December 1940, Mandela found that John Gintaba had arranged marriages for him and Justice. Dismayed, they fled to Johannesburg via Queenstown, arriving in April 1941. Mandela found work as a night watchman at Crown Mines, his first sight of South African capitalism in action, but was fired when the Induna discovered that he was a runaway. He stayed with a cousin in George Gorge Township, who introduced Mandela to realtor and ANC activist Walter Sisulu. The latter secured Mandela a job as an articled clerk at the law firm of Witkin, Sadelsky, and Idolman, a company run by Lazar Sadelsky, a liberal Jew sympathetic to the ANC's cause. At the firm, Mandela befriended Gaura Debi, a Xhosa member of the ANC and Communist Party, and Nat Bregman, a Jewish communist who became his first white friend. Mandela attended Communist Party gatherings, where he was impressed that Europeans, Africans, Indians, and coloureds mixed as equals. He later stated that he did not join the party because its atheism conflicted with his Christian faith, and because he saw the South African struggle as being racially based rather than as class warfare. To continue his higher education, Mandela signed up to a University of South Africa correspondence course, working on his bachelor's degree at night, earning a small wage. Mandela rented a room in the house of the Zuma family in the Alexandra Township. Despite being rife with poverty, crime and pollution, Alexandra always remained a special place for him. Although embarrassed by his poverty, he briefly dated a Swazi woman before unsuccessfully courting his landlord's daughter. To save money and be closer to downtown Johannesburg, Mandela moved into the compound of the Witwatersrand Native Labour Association, living among miners of various tribes. As the compound was visited by various chiefs, he once met the Queen Regent of Basutoland. In late 1941, John Gintaba visited Johannesburg, there forgiving Mandela for running away, before returning to Thembuland, where he died in the winter of 1942. Mandela and Justice arrived a day late for the funeral. After he passed his BA exams in early 1943, Mandela returned to Johannesburg to follow a political path as a lawyer rather than become a Privy Councillor in Thembuland. He later stated that he experienced no epiphany, but that he simply found himself doing so, and could not do otherwise. Law Studies and the ANC Youth League, 1943-1949. Mandela began studying law at the University of the Witwatersrand, where he was the only black African student and faced racism. There, he befriended liberal and communist European, Jewish, and Indian students, among them Joe Slovo and Ruth First. Becoming increasingly politicized, in August 1943 Mandela marched in support of a successful bus boycott to reverse fare rises. Joining the ANC, he was increasingly influenced by Sisulu, spending time with other activists at Sisulu's Orlando House, including his old friend Oliver Tambo. In 1943, Mandela met Anton Lambede, an ANC member affiliated with the Africanist branch of African nationalism, which was virulently opposed to a racially united front against colonialism and imperialism or to an alliance with the communists. Despite his friendships with non-blacks and communists, Mandela embraced Lembert's views, believing that black Africans should be entirely independent in their struggle for political self-determination. Deciding on the need for a youth wing to mass mobilize Africans in opposition to their subjugation, Mandela was among a delegation that approached ANC President Alfred Bitini Zuma on the subject at his home in Sophiatown. The African National Congress Youth League was founded on Easter Sunday 1944 in the Bantu Men's Social Centre, with Lembede as president and Mandela as a member of its executive committee. At Sisulu's house, Mandela met Evelyn Mace, a trainee nurse and ANC activist from Nkobo, Transk. Entering a relationship and marrying in October 1944, they initially lived with her relatives until moving into a rented house in the township of Orlando in early 1946. Their first child, Madiba, Thembu, Themkil, was born in February 1945. A daughter, Makazi, was born in 1947, but died of meningitis 9 months later. Mandela enjoyed home life, welcoming his mother and his sister, Libby, to stay with him. In early 1947, his 3 years of articles ended at Witkin, Sadalski, and Idleman, and he decided to become a full-time student, subsisting on loans from the Bantu Welfare Trust. In July 1947, Mandela rushed Lembede, who was ill, to hospital, where he died. He was succeeded as ANCIL president by the more moderate Peter MDA, who agreed to cooperate with communists and non-blacks, appointing Mandela ANCIL secretary. Mandela disagreed with Mvezo's approach, and in December 1947 supported an unsuccessful measure to expel communists from the ANCIL, considering their ideology un-African. In 1947, Mandela was elected to the executive committee of the ANC's Transvaal province branch, serving under regional president C.S. Ramahano. When Ramahano acted against the wishes of the committee by cooperating with Indians and communists, Mandela was one of those who forced his resignation. In the South African general election in 1948, in which only whites were permitted to vote, the Afrikaner-dominated Herenigde Nasionale Party under Daniel Francois Malan took power, soon uniting with the Afrikaner Party to form the National Party. Openly racialist, the party codified and expanded racial segregation with new apartheid legislation. Gaining increasing influence in the ANC, Mandela and his party cadre allies began advocating direct action against apartheid, such as boycotts and strikes, influenced by the tactics already employed by South Africa's Indian community. Zuma did not support these measures and was removed from the presidency in a vote of no confidence, replaced by James Moroka and a more militant executive committee containing Sisulu, MDA, Tambo, and Godfrey Pitye. Mandela later related that he and his colleagues had guided the ANC to a more radical and revolutionary path. Having devoted his time to politics, Mandela failed his final year at Witwatersrand 3 times. He was ultimately denied his degree in December 1949. Defiance Campaign and Transvaal ANC Presidency, 1950–1954. Mandela took Zuma's place on the ANC National Executive in March 1950, and that same year was elected National President of the ANCIL. In March, the Defend Free Speech Convention was held in Johannesburg, bringing together African, Indian, and communist activists to call a May Day general strike in protest against apartheid and white minority rule. Mandela opposed the strike because it was multiracial and not ANC-led. But a majority of black workers took part, resulting in increased police repression and the introduction of the Suppression of Communism Act, 1950, affecting the actions of all protest groups. At the ANC National Conference of December 1951, he continued arguing against a racially united front, but was outvoted. Thereafter, Mandela rejected Lembert's Africanism and embraced the idea of a multiracial front against apartheid. Influenced by friends like Moses Kotane and by the Soviet Union's support for wars of national liberation, his mistrust of communism broke down, and he began reading literature by Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, and Mao Zedong, eventually embracing the Marxist philosophy of dialectical materialism. Commenting on communism, he later stated that he found himself strongly drawn to the idea of a classless society which, to his mind, was similar to traditional African culture where life was shared and communal. In April 1952, Mandela began work at the H. Ambassador law firm, which was owned by a communist, although his increasing commitment to work and activism meant he spent less time with his family. In 1952, The ANC began preparation for a joint defiance campaign against apartheid with Indian and communist groups, founding a national voluntary board to recruit volunteers. The campaign was designed to follow the path of non-violent resistance influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. Some supported this for ethical reasons, but Mandela instead considered it pragmatic. At a Durban rally on the 22nd of June, Mandela addressed an assembled crowd of 10,000, initiating the campaign protests, for which he was arrested and briefly interned in Marshall Square Prison. These events established Mandela as one of the best-known black political figures in South Africa. With further protests, the ANC's membership grew from 20,000 to 100,000. The government responded with mass arrests and introduced the Public Safety Act, 1953 to permit martial law. In May, authorities banned Transvaal ANC President J.B. Marks from making public appearances. Unable to maintain his position, he recommended Mandela as his successor. Although Africanists opposed his candidacy, Mandela was elected regional president in October. In July 1952, Mandela was arrested under the Suppression of Communism Act and stood trial as one of the 21 accused, among them Moroka, Sisulu, and Yusuf Dadoo, in Johannesburg. Found guilty of statutory communism, a term that the government used to describe most opposition to apartheid. Their sentence of 9 months hard labor was suspended for 2 years. In December, Mandela was given a 6-month ban from attending meetings or talking to more than one individual at a time, making his Transvaal ANC presidency impractical, and during this period the defiance campaign petered out. In September 1953, Andrew Kineen read out Mandela's "No Easy Walk to Freedom" speech at a Transvaal ANC meeting. The title was taken from a quote by Indian independence leader Jawaharlal Nehru, a seminal influence on Mandela's thought. The speech laid out a contingency plan for a scenario in which the ANC was banned. This Mandela Plan, or M-Plan, involved dividing the organization into a cell structure with a more centralized leadership. Mandela obtained work as an attorney for the firm Terblanche and Briggish, before moving to the liberal-run Hellman and Michel, passing qualification exams to become a full-fledged attorney. In August 1953, Mandela and Thembu opened their own law firm, Mandela and Thembu, operating in downtown Johannesburg. The only African-run law firm in the country, it was popular with aggrieved blacks, often dealing with cases of police brutality. Disliked by the authorities, the firm was forced to relocate to a remote location after their office permit was removed under the Group Areas Act. As a result, their clientele dwindled. As a lawyer of aristocratic heritage, Mandela was part of Johannesburg's elite black middle class, and accorded much respect from the black community. Although a second daughter, Makazi Mvumia, was born in May 1954, Mandela's relationship with Evelyn became strained, and she accused him of adultery. He may have had affairs with ANC member Lillian Oyi and Secretary Ruth Mompati. Various individuals close to Mandela in this period have stated that the latter bore him a child. Disgusted by her son's behavior, Nosgani returned to Transk, while Evelyn embraced the Jehovah's Witnesses and rejected Mandela's preoccupation with politics. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?